Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. This is the Voices of Healing podcast. I'm your host, Tina Clark. Today's guest is Angela Clement. She's a certified grief coach, energy healer, and she is the author of Awakening Through Grief. So today we're going to talk about grieving. So this is an important topic, and it's important that we talk about this and how we journey through grieving and how we heal through grieving. So I thank Angela so much for coming on the show and sharing her personal experience with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation.
So tell the audience a little bit more about yourself. How did you become a certified grief coach and energy healer, and a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I was a school principal for 35 years, and just about when I was ready to retire, my husband was diagnosed with colon cancer, and that was in January of 2021, and he went through all the chemotherapy, and then he passed away in October of 2021. And so I found myself in a space where I wasn't sure where to turn. I didn't know what to do. We had planned to retire and do all the things the retired people do some traveling, follow the kids, follow the grandkids. And then all of that changed. And at the same time, I had taken a leave of absence from work and retired, and we also moved in that time. And so I really found myself in a space where it was like starting over. And so that's when I really started to seek out more help. And I had an interest in energy healing from the time when my son was very small. And so I knew that in my retirement, I was going to pursue that. So I decided to really take that more seriously and took a class. And that particular class was introducing me to a whole bunch of different energy healing modalities, such as shamanism and Reiki. And so I started that. And then part of that was um, a marketing piece. And so I was able to do an online summit where I interviewed 27 people, experts in grief. And that started me on a whole journey of just exploring more about what grief is, because lots of us don't really know until you've stepped into this space. We don't talk about it a lot. So that's how I got into the grief thing. And I had also taken, I got a coach, a grief coach, and I had taken her certification program, and that's how I ended up being a grief coach myself. So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So now that you've gone through this, um, what have you learned about grief? Is grief different for every individual? Is there any commonalities or patterns to grieving?
Yeah, there are similarities, but I've found that everybody's grief is just a little bit different because it's a process that's uniquely designed for our own healing. And it's unique because of the relationship that we had with whatever we lost. It doesn't have to be a person, it could be a job, it um, could be a home. So whatever relationship we have with what we lost needs a unique process for us to let go. And so everybody's process is a little bit different, but there are so many commonalities. And so I find having a community and being able to talk about it is really important. There are many things that a lot of people can use to help themselves move through that grieving process.
Yeah. So how would you go about finding these communities? Um,
Mm.
not even something I've even been involved with and thought about looking for.
Yeah, well, you don't until, until you really need it. And for me, it was, a couple of months, and I just decided I just didn't know what to do with myself. The grief was really intense, and there was a lot of emotions coming up I didn't know what to do with. And so I started searching online, and that's how I ended up doing what I was doing. But now, with the internet and Zoom, there's a lot more out there that you can access. Um, I didn't realize that there's a lot more grief coaches now than there ever was, I think. And it's so important because when I first started down this journey, I thought, I could go see a counselor, I could go see a therapist, but part of me thought, I don't know how much they can help me because he's still gone. Doesn't matter what they say, right?
Hmm.
But when I did meet with the grief coach, she made such a difference in just helping me manage the emotions that were coming up, and then also reframing my thoughts around the whole process of letting go and the whole process of just being able to work through and start to rebuild my life again so that I could have more joy and fulfillment again.
Yeah, that sounds like it's something important, and it's an important resource we all have now. So back in the 90s, when my father passed away, I think the only option would be therapy. And honestly, I think my therapy was going out dancing because I just started college. So I danced a lot.
Yeah, well,
But
and that is an outlet.
yeah,
That is
so
one of the ways that you can do that. Yeah.
yeah, so I give myself credit for doing that because, when you start college, it's supposed to be exciting and fun, and you make new friends, you're in a new school. And so I was determined to enjoy myself despite the fact, my father passed away around high school graduation.
Hmm.
So I moved a lot of that energy through with the dancing, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I lost weight, which I needed to. So I actually lost weight when I started college.
Yeah, well, and that is an important tool. Moving is a great way to move the emotion because really emotions are energy in motion,
Hmm.
and energy needs to move, it needs to flow. And so when we stuff emotions down or we hold them, then nothing can flow. And it really causes physical symptoms in the body eventually as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm. What are some of the physical symptoms you found with grieving? Like what comes up for people physically?
Yeah, well, a lot of people hold grief in their lungs.
Mm.
And so you'll hear people say, I just can't breathe. You're basically holding your breath, embracing yourself. And so a lot of that happens there. I found I had a lot of digestive system issues, and that's pretty common as well. Um, and, a person doesn't realize the connection between the emotion and those physical symptoms. And a lot of times, when we can deal with the thoughts that are happening in our head, and that changes the emotion. And then that helps to get things flowing, as well as the energy healing. That was super important for me to have the energy healers help me move the energy through my body, because sometimes it's so intense that trying to do it yourself is just really hard.
Yeah, that's really interesting and important because energy healers like Reiki healers, can improve the flow of energy through the body. So
Mhm.
we have the 7 chakras, the main energy centers of the body, and sometimes they slow down, they don't circle as big or as fast as they should. And so what happens is your energy is not flowing through your body properly, and then you end up feeling tired or stuck, or you have some kind of physical symptom associated with it. So I love that. Well, I love energy healing. I'm a Reiki master. So it does get that energy flowing if you feel
Mhm.
stuck in any way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And it's super important, I think, to keep an open mind about that, because I think a lot of people, um, they don't understand the whole aspect of energy healing and what it can do for you. But I try to encourage people to try different ones, because there's all kinds. There's sound healing that you can try. You can try yoga. That's another form of healing. There's lots of different types of modalities that you can, and everybody's different. It doesn't, what works for me might not work for you. So it's important to keep an open mind and try some different things.
yeah. So, how long did it take you to go through the grieving process? Because it looks like you were utilizing, um, coaching and energy healing. How long did it take before you felt like you were out of the hole?
Yeah. Well, some people say you will grieve for a lifetime. And I don't believe that.
Mm,
Um, I know that, there may be periods of sadness where maybe I recognize something that, um, something catches me off guard, but after 3 years, I don't feel that anymore, and if those little moments come up, I know so well how to handle it now, because I've gone through it so many times that it doesn't really get me the way it used to. And I think, a lot of it was taking the time to actually address those emotions that are coming up, because they really have messages for us. When you have sadness, being curious about why that sadness is there. And sometimes it's really obvious, and sometimes it's something underneath that's causing it. And so, and sometimes it's just the way that we think that's causing that emotion as well. And so, just adjusting our perception a little bit, or changing our thoughts, can really make a difference. So, I don't know exactly when, I feel like I was finished grieving, but by the end of 2 years, I would say things were way better. And now, after 3 years, I really feel like, I'm living a full, joyful life again. And, I look back on the loss differently now. It's more with gratitude and love and appreciation for the opportunity, to live with and to, have my children with this wonderful man for 35 years, right? And we had this wonderful time together, and it doesn't feel sadness anymore. It doesn't feel like that. It feels more like, I said, appreciation, gratitude, love, right? Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does get better. The time goes by and, the intensity of the emotions lessen. Will you still miss that person? Yes.
Yeah, well,
You
because they're
know,
gone. Yeah.
you will miss them and things will remind you of them.
Mhm.
And, if it's a parent, every Father's Day, every Mother's Day, you'll miss them, because they're not in the physical anymore. but they're still with you. Their energy is still alive and with you. It's just a different form.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it does get better. It's bad in the beginning,
Mhm.
especially if you weren't prepared.
Yeah.
And if it's a kind of a shock. And I think with your husband, it happened fairly quickly, right?
Yeah. Just over the 10 months. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's fairly quickly. Like my father died of a heart attack. He was gone in 24 hours.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was super quick, very shocking. I had been away at school, so I didn't know he had been sick. So it was a big, and I was only 18 years old.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a shock. But then my mother passed away recently and she was 89, but I think I had been preparing for her passing since my dad passed. I mean, I think that sounds morbid, but when you lose somebody you love like that, you understand that anybody can go at any time.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
yeah, and that's one of the lessons I learned is always say I love you because that person may not be there the next day. That's
Yes.
like a really hard lesson to learn. But that being said, I spent a lot of time with my mom, even as she aged, and we took vacations together. And, she lived to a nice age of 89,
Hmm.
and she lived a long, exciting, full of adventure life. And I think that because I had always been preparing for it, when she actually passed, I wasn't feeling like I got run over by a truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is anticipatory grief, right?
Mhm.
And I would have, I definitely felt some of that in that 10 months because the prognosis was not good. It was stage 4 colon cancer. And so there was always that in the back of my mind. But also, I was grieving the loss of the man I knew because now him fighting for his life and being sick, our whole lives had changed. Everything had changed. And I was grieving the life before I had to worry about it.
Mhm.
Right. And so, yeah, there was a lot of grief taking place. And I mean, at the time, I didn't know it. But looking back, I realized, all of that grieving process was taking place right away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if someone loses a loved one, what would your advice be to them? Where do they begin to get help?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's lots of um, podcasts and you can you can watch and listen to a lot of different grief coaches, and what I recommend to people is try to find somebody, either a coach that can work one-on-one with you or a community that you can go to that resonates with you. So, sometimes people will go to a community and when you leave that meeting, you feel worse than when you went in, because sometimes the stories might drag you down or make you feel. So find a place where people resonate with you, that it helps uplift you. And same thing with your grief coach. It's a very personal thing. You can go to a really good therapist that's been recommended by somebody, but if you don't connect with them in some way, then it's really hard to get the full benefit of it. And so the way I found my grief coach was, I looked online, actually was on Facebook, and she had a quote on Facebook that said, some people will say you'll grieve for a lifetime. I choose otherwise. I choose the path from hurt to hope to healing every day. And to me, that quote just meant, there's hope. There's a way through this. You don't have to stay in that state forever. And so I signed up with her, and most of the coaches will have like a 30-minute discovery session that you can just for free just connect with them. And I knew in that half hour, that she was going to help me. And I was still scared, I was terrified about meeting with her because I knew that I would have to talk about what happened and I would have probably cry,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't too confident about that. But as I moved through that process, I realized that, I would never be where I am today without that help and guidance from her and the connection that we made. It's really important to be able to make that personal connection with someone, and feel safe and, have that trust, in that person. So I just recommend people to reach out. There's lots out there. And if you want to look on my website, I have lots of resources, healingenergy.world. Um, I have the podcast, I have blog posts, I have a book where I share all the resources that I used as I went through my journey. And so hoping that, something there will resonate with you and help you and give you hope and inspiration for the future.
Yeah, what's the name of your podcast?
It's called Awaken Your Soul's Journey,
Mm-hmm.
Embracing Grief as a Transformation, Pathway to Transformation. So if you search Awaken Your Soul's Journey or just go to my website, healingenergy.world, the links are all there for the
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
And how long did you do the energy healing? Was that
I,
for
yeah. You mean for myself?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm still continuing to work with energy healers.
Mm-hmm.
I really think, even though I do energy healing myself, I really think it's important to have, a coach or somebody that works with you, a life coach even. I think it's important to have someone to help guide you because sometimes we don't see the forest for the trees, right?
Right,
It's nice
right.
to have someone else's perspective and look in on what you're doing. So yeah, I still work with energy healers. Maybe not as much or as intensely as I did in the beginning, but I still check in with them from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's many resources out there if you're going through grief right now. Um, find a coach, find a community, um, find an energy healer to help you get through it because no one is supposed to heal alone. You're supposed
Oh,
to reach out and get some help.
yeah.
And even us healers, energy healers like me, I have to reach out and I can't figure out things on my own. So it's not a failure or anything. It just means that's how things are set up on planet Earth. You're not here alone in a bubble and you need to get help, right, Angela?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and some people will say, well, I can't, afford that. But there's lots of free resources as well. And I mean, myself, I hold a grief community online on Zoom. We meet every 10 days and it's absolutely free and anyone's welcome to join. And it's a wonderful community. There's a lot of experienced people who have gone through some really traumatic grief. And there's some new people that have started up. And so there's all kinds of people on different walks of the journey, and certainly someone there that you could relate to for sure.
Well, that sounds amazing. So check out Angela's website for that information. It'll all be in the show notes. And thank you so much, Angela, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me for this important discussion.